wonderful to see all of you here. Welcome. And thank you for joining the launch of Section 27.
Heaven is under the earth.
Many of you will know that we are already engaged in our first battle for Section 27. So our right to the name Section 27 was denied twice by the Registrar of Companies, who tells us that we're not allowed to use a provision of the Constitution in our name. So this is how we begin Section 27 with the legal battle. I don't know whether this is an inauspicious start or not, but so be it.
Firstly, I want to congratulate you on launching such an excellent campaign to combine law and struggle to confront the critical challenges facing us today.
We are closing the ALP not because we have failed and not because we have succeeded, but because we want to contribute to revitalizing struggles for AIDS treatment, health, and human rights.
I believe that Section 27 is a very great initiative as far as bringing together communities and civil society to collaborate as to fighting for the rights of the people.
Section 27 is a way forward in the sense that it's going to give us more clarity on how the law operates.
I can really understand why some bureaucrats would object to the use of Section 27. There's a real danger that people might get to understand what their rights are, and that could be very alarming.
I'm calling the AIDS Law Project staff and the board members of the new Section 27
I just want to laugh every time we do this. And these two don't help. Why don't you start?
No, I'm scared. We're talking.
It's exactly how I'm feeling.
Why Section 27? Because it's an obvious development from the work that we have been doing on AIDS and right to health generally. So Section 27 protects the right of access to healthcare services, water, sanitation, and so on.
It's a way both of drawing attention to the Constitution, but it's also a way of drawing attention to this particular section of the Constitution which deals with the rights of access to healthcare services, and it helps them to understand the powers that we have in this country by virtue of the Constitution.
And this section in particular emphasizes the obligations placed upon the state within its available resources to achieve progressive realization of all these rights, not just the right to health, but also the right to clean water, sufficient food, and security.
Well, I started at the AIDS Law Project as a legal researcher, and my main focus was on health systems work, which is interesting because it shows you that it was at that time that we were already thinking about broader issues, not just HIV, but how HIV fits into the health system and what is needed of the health system in order to deliver services to people living with HIV.
I started working at the AIDS Law Project in January of 2002, and it was at a time when the ALP had decided to have a dedicated focus on access to treatment. I was tasked with drafting affidavits, and I said to Zaki, I have no idea what to do. How does one draft an affidavit? He said, just do it. So that was where I really first started working with the ALP in a more formal way.
When I became the head of the AIDS Law Project, I really knew nothing about law, so you had a strange situation of somebody who knew nothing about law but headed a legal organization. So I had to teach myself, and I taught myself really by bringing in people who did know about law and turning the AIDS Law Project from something that had depended very much on Edwin and Zaki into something that was a more solid type of organization that was based upon people who were real lawyers. And I guess it was through watching their practice that I learned what is a founding affidavit and what is a notice of motion and what's an applicant.
The Section 27 has assisted us as community members and tech on the ground with facilitating workshops. We've learned how to write your case studies, how to write memorandums, how to write affidavits, and how to write complaints, how to lodge complaints in different departments. We've also learned from Section 27 how we can use our constitution to hold government accountable.
We are here today with doctors and nurses to go and see inmates with CD4 counts below 200 who need treatment urgently. Right now, 3 people from TAC, including myself, came here waiting for the state official to call us to tell us that we should come in or not. And a group of government officials or wardens with guns, bulletproofs and dogs came to us saying that we should move 100 meters away because we're not allowed to picket. In my understanding, we are not picketing and we're not carrying any placards. We haven't given them any reason to think that we are picketing at this point.
I'm telling you right now, I don't need you around here. Yes, I don't need you around here.
It's the police.
You are not supposed to be here.
It's you personally or it's the
and
police.
And that is final.
It's you.
Remove them.
Yeah, because we must call our lawyers for this.
Yes.
We must call our lawyers for this.
The Westville case, that case was really about implementation. That case was about saying we have this protection. We've already recognized in the law that prisoners have a right to ARV treatment. It was a high point because we felt that we were actually making a shift as far as implementation of law went, rather than just setting a precedent.
So we have so many wonderful pieces of legislation, but the real problem before courts is how do you enforce legislation? It's not now a problem of the doctrinal or conceptualization of human rights, but the enforcement of human rights to make a difference to people on the ground.
Njengomuntu ophila neligciwane, inhliziyo yami ibuhlungu kakhulu njengoba ngiyabuka nama-TV ngiyazlalela nasey'ndabeni ngiyezwa o-TAC beyipromote bathi ngampela ama-ARVs anegalelo elikhulu ekuphiliseni impilo noma ekuphephiseni impilo zabantu abaphila neligciwane. So inhliziyo yami ngajabula kakhulu uma nala ngaphakathi ekhaya noma kulo muzi lo okhona waseWestville nalo hlelo ama-ARVs lungaqalisa khona.
Hey man, my comrades, march for treatment, my comrades, march for treatment.
One, that the respondents are hereby ordered with immediate effect to provide antiretroviral treatment in accordance with the aforesaid operational plan to the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 6th, 7th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and 15th applicants and all other similarly situated prisoners at Westville Correctional Centre at an accredited public health facility.
I haven't had a chance yet to read the judgment, but I've read the final order that was read out in court. The third part of the judgment then is for the state on or before the 7th of July on oath in an affidavit to set out what steps it is taking to comply with the second part of the order, putting people on treatment. So the state to set out its plan for getting prisoners at Westville onto ARV treatment.
The basic premise of what we're trying to say is that if people don't know their rights, then they can't claim their rights. If people don't know this Constitution and its powers, they can't use the Constitution. So the method is still very much the method of the AIDS Law Project, and law has been at the heart of everything. Law is the veiled and sometimes unveiled weapon that gets people to listen to you.
And police brutality is a very common thing in Vosloorus. And then in 2010, October. Another day again when there was a pride in Guatemala. So we came back late at night, and others went home, and then others went to Tandi's house in Extension 14 because it was Tandi's mom's birthday. 4 police cars came. They pepper sprayed everyone who was in the yard, and they went into the rooms, pulled people from bed. People were sleeping already. Immediately when they got to the police station, then they called me as the tech district chairperson or the district coordinator to alert me that they were arrested. And it was around 1 or 2 a.m. that day. And I immediately called Mark Haywood, who is the director of Section 27, and I called Adila and Nonkosi. And eventually Adila, on that Sunday, Adila Hassan from Section 27, arrived at the police station. And she spent almost the day with us in the police station until the last person was released, and we all went home.
We don't see ourselves as legal crusaders, but we certainly will take it up, especially where there aren't any other lawyers who are taking it up.
The lawyers in Section 27 are not just your ordinary lawyers. They are activists. They understand the importance of acting on impulse from different situations in the township. Had we called another law firm on a Sunday, they would have said, okay, fine, we'll see them on Monday before they appear in court. But with Section 27, they left their families and came to Vosloorus to see what was going on and deal with the matter immediately.
In this last year, we've dealt with numerous legal matters and resolved most of them without going to court. For as long as rule of law is respected, then the threat of the use of law is very powerful.
So this client is a horse riding instructor, and he was employed by Mooikloof Estates. They discovered subsequent to his employment that he was HIV positive and then fired him.
I was called to go and meet with Mr. Milan, and he told me I'd been dismissed because of the fact that I was HIV, and told me I had to pack up my bags and leave the premises immediately. And then I refused to leave, obviously. A few days later, they manhandled me and threw me off the premises.
Judge Bula has found that in this case, Gary Alpas's dismissal was automatically unfair, and that his dismissal was completely related to the fact that he had HIV and had nothing to do with his ability to do the job that he was employed to do, and that job was to be a riding instructor.
The judge made some very strong statements about the fact that so many years since the Constitution and since the protection of labor rights, we still have this kind of discrimination, and it was particularly egregious discrimination by an employer, even in the manner in which they conducted the case.
The significance of this case is that it concerns a small employer, and that the judge has said, I don't buy people who come and invent excuses after the dismissal to try to justify what was in reality only to do with HIV infection.
People often don't know their rights. There haven't been many cases like this, and it's one of the reasons why we fought this case to the bitter end, so that there can be an example of a success and a victory in claiming your rights on the basis of discrimination in the workplace.
You don't need to understand the complexities of the law. That's the simple message that we have to get out to people. And people, even if they live in poor areas and informal settlements or in rural areas, seek the protection of the law. Look for something called justice centers.
We can't use civil society as an extension of government. But at the same time, they can be our ears and eyes, but they can also constructively criticize us and raise issues. Where I have problems is conflict and confrontation that that does not lead to positive outcomes.
The critical difference from the AIDS Law Project and now is the ability to work with government when we couldn't before. And we have found, and it's very difficult terrain to navigate because we're not letting government off the hook, but you can't be in a confrontational, conflictual mode all the time if you actually want to get things done.
Probably the most memorable moment was at the beginning of the civil disobedience campaign, where we disrupted Mantu Chabalala Msimang's keynote address. TAC had sent a letter saying, given the context, given what this woman stands for, I mean, this is early 2003, no treatment plan anywhere close. It's inappropriate at a public health conference for you to be inviting her, and either you uninvite her or we will be there to protest.
We want to tell you and President Mbeki that if 200,000 people every year are dying of hunger after 10 years of your rule, then you need to ask yourself, shouldn't you to resign? Isn't it time for both of you to resign?
And I remember standing about a meter and a half away from her, screaming at the top of my lungs, murderer, murderer. Just hadn't realized how much anger had built up in all of us.
I've never seen in any country an instance where a health sector is at war with itself.
We have developed a working relationship of a sort with the Ministry of Health and with the DG's office, where we are trying to provide assistance and legal advice and legal opinions on restructuring the health sector and how to deal with the private sector. And I do think that's important and something we have to keep doing, but in a very cautious way so that we don't end up undermining our own cause because we are now conflicted and we can't challenge government when we have to.
We know that South African communities, our communities are not yet empowered enough to challenge. I would rather have an organization like Section 27 be empowered to help our communities to know their rights, but also work with government to strengthen our service delivery in such a way that we are responsive and that we recognize those rights.
There's a lot of system structures, governmental committees now that we are operating in, probably half a dozen. And our board is very alive to the dangers. It supports it, but it's very alive to the dangers. And one of the things it said is that every board meeting, you must give a report on what is happening in these committees so that we can assess continually to make sure that it's contribution, not its independent contribution, not co-option.
Yeah.
The Constitution is clear. It says the state must deliver. The Constitution is saying, it's not saying that the state may deliver when it has resources. The state must. And that must means they have an obligation, they have a duty. And by having a duty, they have to, within their own limited resources, implement policies that they are able to realize those rights that are enshrined in the Constitution in order for the right to life and the right to dignity to be enjoyed by any other citizen in South Africa.
Now we have a government whose mandate is to improve the conditions of life of all, including in particular the poor and the downtrodden. And because of the legacy of the past, that is no easy task. But it's been made more difficult. It's been made much more difficult than it should be by the rush to secure material benefits that are now available. Corruption has seeped into administration, and many who live in dire poverty and whose needs are the greatest have been passed by.
One of the things that we never expected to do was work heavily on corruption, but we are now engaged in creating an organization called Corruption Watch, and in doing the preparatory work there, an alliance has been created between a few private law firms, an accounting firm, COSATU, and us, and it's an alliance to do something. But it's this working together that starts to change the world, or change the nation, or change the local space, or whatever it may be. I don't think Mantu's death was a turning point. You know, the real turning point was the point at which she was removed as Minister of Health. You know, we were asked to comment, obviously, at the time of her death, and it didn't serve any purpose, really, to glorify any person's death.
And she was moved out of the health ministry. That was a time when we were making calls and demands for accountability and honesty about what the impact had been of that decade in which she ruined the health system, along with others.
You just have to compare a Mantu with a Motsoaledi to see whether an individual can make a vast difference for bad, as well as a vast difference for good.
I think it's those individuals who are now, perhaps they feel also they have the space to be able to engage with us openly, and also recognize that we bring a particular skill and expertise to the table.
The difference with Section 27 is their knowledge base, particularly in health law, which I've found to be quite remarkable. And I would like to use that resource in a manner that they should not use health law for purposes of litigation only, which has been, unfortunately, our history. I would like this resource to be used to help us to respond. I always say that the only way we can recognize a civil society role is if we are activists at heart and we're driven by passion to do certain things. Unless we do that, we are here as administrators to push paper, and desert another day, we get our checks and life goes on.
As we have done on the right to health, to use the Constitution to advance the use of law in also gaining some gaining some successes around other socio-economic rights, for example, access to food, education, that also have an impact to the right to health.
As part of our Section 27 formula, one of the areas where we broadened our work was to say we have to concentrate on defending and advancing the rule of law, because that's the foundation for the work.
Now, when we talk of good governance, particularly in the context of the rule of law, I think all of us emphasize certain features of good governance, and these are first and foremost accessibility, accountability, transparency, responsiveness, efficiency, inclusiveness, and above all, a sense of ethics.
And the fundamental respect for human rights and equality in Northern Ireland can be seen. You have a Section 27. We have a Section 75. And so you can see how important we thought equality and human rights were. There are 74 sections in our peace agreement before you get down to recognising that the peace should involve equality and non-discriminatory actions. And part of that is because when we talk about the rule of law, we have to understand, what are we talking about? Are we talking about concepts of law that are compatible with a fair and just and equitable world that respects the integrity and the dignity of all human beings? If that is the context in which we speak of law, and if that is the context in which we speak of constitution, then there is nothing more important to us than constitution and the rule of law.
You know, it was our intention when we set up Section 27 to move beyond HIV and beyond health as well. But what we wanted to retain was a methodology that we've developed over years of working with Treatment Action Campaign and the success of the partnership with the Treatment Action Campaign. And so what we've tried to do is now nurture a relationship with Equal Education, who is a very key ally of Section 27, to work together with them, as we did with the Treatment Action Campaign, on education issues. In fact, the first case that we took for equal education had to do with the right to protest, the right to freedom of assembly. They were about to have a libraries campaign, but we received a response, or Equal Education received a response from the Director General that they're not allowed to march near the union buildings, which in fact was a very big reminder for us that as we work on the cases on health or education or on food, and those are socioeconomic rights cases, you can't forget the civil and political rights that underlie it.
I think there are a need for all groups who wish to engage on socioeconomic rights. I think the policy of Section 27 is right. It's a policy to build coalitions between different organizations who are engaged in enforcing social and economic rights, focusing itself on the right to health and welfare, but realizing that the rights are interrelated and that one right affects the other, and it will work in combination with the other groups who are enforcing other rights. I think it's a correct policy. I think there's a space for it. I think it's doing important work. I'm sure it will do well.
More than 50% of our health expenditure goes to less than 20% of our population. The poor majority must make do with a public health system that's in crisis. But is the proposed national health insurance the solution? Well, Adila Hassim, let me come to you first.
In the Constitution, it says that everyone in this country has a right of access to healthcare services. The reality is that the majority of people in the country don't have access to healthcare services. The other unique feature of our Constitution is that it puts a duty on government to do something about this. So I think what we really need now is government leadership that is moving towards increasing access to healthcare services. Whether national health insurance is going to be the panacea is something we need to investigate. I think the first step is we have a discussion, a process. The principles are out on the table. We can't have business as usual, and we can't have a two-tier system in the way we are operating at the moment. So we need to hear from private sector, not just about the efficiencies that are happening in the private sector in their view, but what is private sector going to bring to the table?
You know, it has potential to transform the health system positively. It also has the potential to be a great disaster if a wrong policy is implemented. I think the first steps that we're going to have to take is to do everything possible to engage for a sensible policy that will transform, that will create a unified health system that will make the private sector recognize that it has obligations to the public sector and to public health objectives in this country.
In terms of what the government envisages it will do, they would be concerned moving forward with setting up an auditing and norms unit within the health department that would monitor the delivery of services, both in hospitals and at primary healthcare services. There will be development of a national health insurance, which means a different way in terms of how we're financing healthcare in South Africa. And Treasury do acknowledge that it's going to be a complex process, that it needs openness and as much of a debate in the civil society as possible. And so this cannot be a discussion that happens somewhere else, outside the civil society and people that would be affected by the delivery of the services. We have a challenge ahead of us.